FM, broadcasting from the Hub. I'm Henry, and here's Jeremy with the news.
In rugby union, the Wallabies suffered a heartbreaking loss to the All Blacks last night, going down 29-28. New Zealand scored a 79th minute try to snatch victory from Australia in Brisbane. Ewan McKenzie resigned after the game, lasting only 15 months in the top job. Pakistan A has won the 4-day tour match in the United Arab Emirates, bowling Australia out for 185 in their second innings. Alex Doolan top scored, making 104, while Australian captain Michael Clark made 10 before being dismissed. A high-scoring Matador one-day cup clash at North Sydney Oval saw the delightful Dr. Queensland Bulls chase down 398 to beat Tasmanian Tigers. Tasmania's Ben Duff made 229, while his opening partner Tim Payne scored 125, as they put 277 runs on for the opening wicket. For Queensland, Usman Khawaja 166 and Chris Hartley 142 put on 280 to lead their run chase. Joe Burns made a handy 48 to help the Bulls cross the line in 49th over. In the A-League overnight, Sydney FC beat crosstown rivals Western Sydney Wanderers 3-2, and the Wellington Phoenix defeated the Central Coast Mariners 2-1. Southampton thrashed Sunderland 8-0 in the English Premier League also. First up, we'll be talking about the trade week. The wrap-up of the AFL trade week. So, Henry, what have you seen over the week in the trade?
It's obviously been fairly unprecedented in the AFL. Never really seen a number of players that have been under contract announcing that they wanted to leave. We had players like Ryan Griffin, Tom Boyd, who both swapped clubs between each other, Dane Beans, Adam Cooney, quite high-profile names, and all of them, still with deals with their original club, and for whatever reason, whether it's money or personal reasons or more opportunity. But I think this is probably the future of the AFL, where they're starting to embrace the culture that's sort of seen in overseas sports, and I think in future years we'll see clubs be a bit more aggressive in regards to the amount of money that they spend on their contracts, and instead of sort of waiting for players to announce where they want to go, really target them and sort of present them with contracts that are almost irresistible sort of thing. So, well, I think we'll see more of this next year and beyond, I would say.
Yeah, we saw some really big deals like Tom Boyd from Great Western Sydney, first round draft pick last year, and he's already leaving to go. I think he's a Melbourne boy, so going back home. I mean, that kind of makes sense.
Yeah, obviously, clubs will be doing their research on as to whether, players are sort of a bit disheartened with the team that they're currently playing at, and if they know that they can sort of poach them fairly easily, then they'll, scout them during the year, and then once the time comes, I think the Western Bulldogs, well, they didn't say this publicly, but it's been reported that they were sort of almost, planning a deal for him next year. But as soon as Ryan Griffin announced that he was going to, he wanted to go to GWS, the Bulldogs almost just initiated their plan, 12 months earlier, and thought, why don't we go for it now? And clearly it paid off for them. So whether it's the right strategy in regards to paying that amount of money to someone that's only 19, but clearly, being a number one draft pick and being a tall forward of his, height and size, you don't often get a chance to recruit someone like that. So, I think the Dogs are probably, while they're clearly still in turmoil in regards to losing their coach and their captain, I think they're pretty happy that they've got someone that they can rely on for the next 7 years in regards to having a real tall forward target.
I think you could argue they're not going to be able to rely on him next year.
No, not next year, but at least they know that they've got someone there.
And I don't think he's a sure thing. Like, you've seen number one draft picks before that have not performed.
No, exactly.
And you're putting a lot of pressure on him by giving him a $7 million deal. Like, that's a lot of pressure to put on a young 19-year-old.
Oh, there's no doubt he's going to have a lot of pressure, and he'll be known as the money kid next year and beyond. But I think they'll, the Western Bulldogs haven't had a real legitimate tall target for quite a while, since probably Chris Grant back in the late 90s, early 2000s. So they'll be pretty happy that they got him, and I think we'll obviously it would have been pretty difficult to talk Ryan Griffin back into staying after the way that he conducted himself post-season, and when he announced he was leaving, it would have been pretty hard to sort of convince the rest of the players at the Bulldogs that we're still trying to keep this player even though he didn't want to be there. So once they saw the opportunity that their captain was wanting to leave, they probably thought, well, this is the best opportunity we can get to get someone of his sort of caliber. Whether he's going to make it or not is still to be seen, but it's not often you get a chance to get a number one draft pick out of the team only 1 year after he's been drafted. So I think we'll see more clubs try to do that potentially. We've got next year with James H falling out of contract, whether both Adelaide and Port Adelaide won't, they'll probably aggressively target him as well. And being a midfielder, you're probably going to have a bit more confidence on what you'll get him as a player, because of the fact that midfielders are a bit more, they seem to, there's a bit more assurity for clubs when they draft midfielders, knowing that they'll probably deliver as compared to tall forwards who take a bit more time to develop, and there's not the certainty that you get with you see a lot of midfielders, as soon as they're drafted, they perform pretty well in the team straight away 1 year after their draft year. So we saw other clubs like Brisbane, whether Dane Beans was moving to Brisbane purely because of his father, or whether there was the influence of a big money contract was there as well. Who really knows the full story? But good on Brisbane for targeting a player that's sort of in the top maybe 15 in the league, and adding Christensen as well, along with their midfield of Rockcliffe and Redden and Rich and all the other youngsters that I've with Aish, Sam Mays, Pierce Hanley plays a bit in the midfield as well, and I think they're going to be fairly strong in years to come with that midfield. They've still got a bit of holes to fill in the forward line in defence, but their midfield is one of the most packed in the league, I would say now. Even though they've got they're a little bit young, but I think most clubs would love to have a midfield that's got that much challenge in it that the Lions have.
Yeah, so after a week and a half of bargaining, Port Adelaide finally got Paddy Ryder.
Yeah, it took them, I guess it didn't really take them, it took Essendon, a week and a half to finally, accept the deal. I think once they knew that they could convince Adam Cooney to go to Essendon, that sort of, so I think because they always wanted the first round draft pick that Port were offering and a ready-made player. So once Adam Cooney was sort of pushed out the door, I think they were fairly happy to accept the deal in the end. They would have liked a bit more, but to get someone that could deliver for them next year, plus the first round draft pick, and I think we all know that if Essendon players do get suspended, they'll take any player that they can get at the moment to potentially fill a team next year. We saw that with them recruiting Jonathan Giles as well, and picking up James Wilt, who was being delisted by St Kilda. They might be sort of showing their hand a bit in regards to whether they think their players will be suspended if they're trying to pick up as many players as possible to fill the team next year.
I don't think I'm not sure we'll end up like that, but anyway. We've got also Crows. They picked up a couple of guys from Hawthorn.
Yeah, so both clearly not superstar players. Loudon's only played one game in 6 years, so a bit of a journeyman, and it was a fairly good story when he played his first game last year. The Hawks quite posted a video online of him talking with his mother about him being pulled up for his first game, and I think the Crows just wanted someone to support Sam Jacobs, because they delisted Sean McKernan and Angus Graham, so that was basically their entire ruck depth being delisted immediately. So they've they filled a bit of depth there with Loudon. You wouldn't think that Loudon would play any games next year, but if Jacobs does get injured, at least there's someone that could possibly fill in. And Cheney from Hawthorn as well. The Crows are after a few tall defenders, with Ben Rutten retiring. And while Cheney's not a tall defender, I think we saw with the Crows game against North Melbourne earlier this year where Zeeble kicked 5 goals, I think. The Crows didn't really have anyone that could play on sort of a mid-sized forward.
Yeah.
So the only players the Crows have were either, people that were over 190 centimetres or really small players like Luke Brown and Rory Laird who were under 180 centimetres. So they really needed someone that was sort of in that 185 to 190 bracket. And I wouldn't be surprised if Cheney plays a fair amount of game time next year. As I said, while he's not, he's not going to win your flag for you, but that sort of fills a gap that the Crows, didn't have on their list recently. So, and then the Crows also swapped a few their first round draft pick to Geelong just so that they could recoup a second round draft pick. So the Crows are obviously thinking that they can still grab the player that they were after, even by dropping 4 spots in the first round. We'll see if that pays off or not.
Alright, just quickly, 3 winners and 3 losers from the trade.
I think Porter obviously a winner. Getting Paddy Ryder, and Ryder will be, as long as he doesn't get suspended, he'll have a big impact next year. You have to say Brisbane are a winner with getting Deans and Christensen. And while we didn't have any trade week, but I think Hawthorn adding James Frawley will be, that certainly helps as well. You can't knock back someone that, is in their mid-20s and could instantly add to Hawthorn's backline. So 3 losers. Well, not necessarily losers, but I think we saw that with West Coast, Fremantle, and I think Richmond were the only 3 teams that didn't do anything in trade week. So while they didn't necessarily lose anyone, they didn't really show a lot of eagerness to really improve their list. So I wouldn't necessarily say they're losers, but it's probably not a great sign when you see other clubs that are really trying to improve their list and be aggressive, that you would enter trade week and do literally nothing. So they're not necessarily losers, but I think they deserve a bit of criticism for not really trying to do anything active in the only period where you can improve your list outside of the draft. So I'll mention those 3 teams, I guess.
Yeah, nice. We'll head to the song. We'll be back with Ozsports FM talking about the Adelaide United and Melbourne Victory match on Friday night.
Something shines in your eyes tonight. Maybe there's no need to lie tonight. I see your lips out on fire. Oh baby, I want you to be mine. Catch me, baby, I'm waiting for you. So come on, break the rules. The time is right, the time's tonight. Let it start and you won't stop. Let it start and I won't stop.
Welcome back, everyone. On Friday night, we had Adelaide United's game against Melbourne Victory at Adelaide Oval. It was a record crowd for a soccer game in South Australia, and a domestic football game in South Australia, with 33,000 people turning up. I think that just shows that, if you play a game, at the right venue, or, in the middle of the city, with good access to public transport and whatnot, you can pull a crowd. And obviously Melbourne Victory are Adelaide's biggest rivals, and you wouldn't be able to pull that same sort of attendance against teams like Wellington or Newcastle or whatnot. But I think Adelaide will be fairly pleased with the attendance that they got on Friday night.
Yeah, definitely. I think also we have to consider the novelty factor.
Oh, exactly. There's always a novelty factor. The only game at Adelaide Oval this year, or this season. So, and also probably a little bit disappointing that it wasn't the best of games. Most of the action really only began in the last sort of 10 minutes of the match. So, hopefully people didn't go away from the game feeling a bit disappointed, because I'm not sure how much money Adelaide United would have made, but you can't get that sort of advertisement when you've got double the amount of people going to a match compared to what you would normally get, and maybe even triple. So let's hope that the next their remaining home games are home match, that they can sort of attract a good crowd, and sort of make a few new fans and possibly sell a few more memberships as well. There was a bit of talk about the fact that the surface was a bit fast. I'm not sure whether, because there was talk earlier in the year about the grass at Adelaide Oval being quite long. So long grass should actually make the surface quite slower. But maybe they've decided to, or maybe they've begun, cutting the grass a bit shorter for the cricket season.
Yeah.
And it was also, they decided to water the pitch before the game started, which makes the ground, slicker and faster. So whether they really need to do that is a good question. Because it certainly impacted on the overall game, with both teams sort of struggling to sort of adapt to the conditions, and probably, not playing on that venue at all, would mean that they're sort of not really used to that sort of surface, and also with the fact with the fans so far away from the action, you sort of can't really feed off the atmosphere of the crowd sort of thing. I mean, because the atmosphere was okay, but the crowd didn't really get into the match until all the action started to begin in the last sort of 5-10 minutes of the match, when Adelaide scored in the 85th minute, I think. So
85th, and I think Melbourne scored in the
88th or something like that. So everything sort of went up like a bang with 10 minutes to go. So the crowd went crazy when Adelaide scored. So the atmosphere was electric when the first goal occurred. But both teams would be sort of, I guess, satisfied that they came away with a point in the end.
I don't know if anybody would be satisfied with
the
draw. I think they would be.
I just both teams struggled to sort of really assert themselves in the game, and I think Melbourne Victory would be satisfied because Adelaide probably outplayed them.
Yeah, Adelaide had 14
shots to 4 or something. Yeah, so Adelaide United clearly had more of the play. So they were probably a bit disappointed that they couldn't get the win, but with the unique circumstances of the game, they would probably be content, I guess, with going away with a 1-1 draw in the end. So in other results so far this week in the A League, we've had Wellington get a 2-1 win against Central Coast, and we had last night's Sydney derby at the Sydney Football Stadium, in front of a record crowd for I'm pretty sure it was a record crowd for any regular season football match at that stadium. So if you don't include the grand finals and final matches in NRL or rugby union and whatnot, that was the biggest crowd that regular season game has ever seen. So I had 41,000 there, which is pretty impressive. And Sydney FC would be pretty pleased that they were able to get the win after falling 2 goals behind early in the Sunday match.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Sydney hasn't been exactly around the mark for a little while, unless the Sydney have been up on top of the ladder.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
also,
good win there.
Yeah, it's a bit surprising considering because the Wanderers have shown excellent form in the Asian Champions League, making the final, and they've got the first leg of the Champions League final next week. But so far they're 0 from 2 in the A-League campaign.
Yeah, especially after being knocked out of the
Cup as well, yeah, by Adelaide City. So so far they've performed extremely well on the Asian scene, but here in Australia at the moment they've struggled big time. Whether they've sort of struggled a bit with having to play quite a few extra matches, I'm not sure, but you would have to think they would still be around the mark to make the finals.
Yeah,
later in the year.
Maybe. But then also there was a red card in 69 minutes for Western Sydney, so they played with 10 men in the last 20 odd minutes, and that's when Sydney FC
scored their winner. Yeah, exactly. So
not that that's an excuse. So you get the red card, and so you obviously just deserve it. So.
Yeah. So later this week we've got later today we've got who's playing?
Melbourne City playing
Newcastle.
Yes. Playing Brisbane Roar, and that is it, I think.
Yeah, that's the end for this round. I think with Melbourne City playing their first home game under their new name and badge and jersey, I think they're expecting quite a big crowd at AAMI Park. So obviously Melbourne, under the identity of Melbourne Heart, they struggle to pull crowds outside of playing their matches against Melbourne Victory. So we'll see whether they can, get people through the turnstiles under their new name. Clearly, there's been a bit of hype around the new owners with the Manchester City background. So you'd hope that they can get a big crowd, and I think they've got the Melbourne Derby next week. So at Etihad Stadium. So it's a huge occasion for the A-League at the moment with the amount of crowds that they've been able to get with 33,000 at Adelaide Oval, 41 at the SFS, and possibly 50,000 plus next week at Etihad. So they've got all the big games early in the season, but so far had great crowds. So
yeah, so they got David Villa also making his full debut.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so last week he sat on the bench.
So he'll that'll get people interested.
Yeah,
whether you're a Melbourne City fan or not, I think that'll get people along. We've also got Perth. That's not against Brisbane Roar in Perth, but Brisbane they lost last week. They did. So they're looking for their first win. While Perth, I'm not sure how they went.
They had they won last week. They played Wellington in New Zealand and they won a 2-1 win. So Perth will be hoping to go 2 from 2.
Yep.
Brisbane Roar, after winning the championship last year, would hope to get their campaign off to a start as well. So both teams, one team's trying to get their first win on the board, and Perth are trying to go to the top of the ladder with 3 teams on 4 points at the moment. So we'll see how that goes later today.
Yeah, we'll head to a word from our sponsors, and we'll be back to talk about Liverpool possibly visiting Australia in an exhibition match in Sydney next year.
Take it from me, one punch can be lethal. Thrown in anger like this, without warning, without any gloves, it can be deadly. One punch can end his life and ruin yours. It takes grunt to throw it, it takes guts to walk away.
Welcome back to Ozsports FM. As I mentioned before the ad, we're going to talk about Liverpool possibly visiting Australia next year for an exhibition match. So they visited in 2013 for a match against Melbourne Victory at the MCG, which I'm pretty sure was sold out.
Yeah, it was. I think they got 95,000 at the MCG last year. So one of the biggest soccer crowds. I think it was probably one of the biggest soccer crowds Australia's ever seen. So, and whenever you get 90,000 plus at the MCG, it's clearly a massive occasion. And the atmosphere when the Liverpool fans saying you'll never walk alone before the game at the MCG was pretty spine-tingling stuff. So if they can replicate that sort of atmosphere, I think they would play at ANZ Stadium, the Olympic Stadium in Sydney. That would be a pretty big coup for New South Wales and whoever Liverpool would play if the match went ahead. Either Western Sydney or Sydney FC, either team, would be, and the players would be pretty excited to play a team like that in front of such a massive crowd.
Yeah, definitely. I think, Liverpool, they bring some pretty top class players.
Oh, exactly. And you would think that whenever big clubs like that go on sort of overseas tours, and they've been paid to come over here and showcase their best players. And we saw earlier this year in the pre-season, there was a pre-season tournament over in America, and some of the big clubs, some of the biggest clubs around the world play those matches in some of the college football stadiums in America, and you saw crowds of like 110, 115,000 attend some of those matches. So clearly, if you've got big clubs playing overseas, regardless of which country they play in, they pull in big crowds. So
even like Southeast Asia, Singapore,
Japan,
they love it.
Yeah, not club football, but they had a few international friendlies over in Asia recently. I think Brazil played Argentina and Singapore, which is a bit odd.
Interesting.
But clearly, countries are willing to pay the appearance fees for those clubs, and they're big coups for the countries, because they improve the economy via the number of visitors that come over, and if we can get other sort of big clubs like Barcelona or Madrid or Man United to come to Australia as well, that would be a pretty big attraction for Australia.
Definitely. So it looks good for football in Australia. It's looking a lot stronger than it was 10 years ago with the A-League and getting these international teams here to play their pre-season matches. So it should be good. We've also got the Asian Cup.
Exactly, coming up in January, I think. So I think we've seen a bit recently with the international teams struggling a bit, sort of transitioning with a few new younger players and some of the older stalwarts retiring. So bit of a transition period for the Socceroos, but clearly they will be going into the Asian Cup hoping that they can win the tournament on home soil as well. So and I think the Asian Cup is one of the most watched sporting events in the world with the number of people that live in Asia. So pretty big occasion for Australia, and hopefully the Socceroos can do really well in early 2015.
Definitely. All right, we're going to head to a song. We'll be back to talk about the Matador Cup and the Pakistan A Australia tour match. I'll see you in a minute. Welcome back to Ozsports FM. As we mentioned earlier, we're going to talk about another World Cup and Pakistan Australia match in the UAE. First up, we'll talk about the one-day competition. South Australia sitting on the bottom. But let's not talk about that for too long. Let's talk about yesterday's game at North Sydney Oval, where Queensland managed to chase down 398 against Tasmania, who you would have thought making 398 pretty much assured a victory, but at North Sydney Oval, it's a postage stamp. It's tiny, and clearly it wasn't a very good. Well, the pitch wasn't too much for the bowlers.
No, not at all. And incredibly, Tasmania they're only going about 4 and over halfway through their innings, and then all of a sudden they went from being about none for 80 after 20 overs to posting 398. So clearly they had the potential to score, possibly 450 runs if they really wanted to, if they got going early in their innings. But I think it's not great for cricket if you've got a match where the bowlers literally can't achieve anything really. With clearly the pitch wasn't doing anything; it was a bit of a road. And when you combine the flat pitch with an oval that is tiny, in North Sydney Oval, they might have to even consider playing some domestic matches somewhere else if the match is purely a bat-off between just like Queensland went none for almost 300 without losing a wicket. So I think they lost their first wicket at about 280 runs not out. So that was a good result for Queensland because that puts them second on the table, only 1 point behind Western Australia. So that result pretty much all but assured New South Wales, Queensland, and Western Australia finishing in the top 3 positions. But Queensland setting I think that was a domestic record for a run chase. So so I think the previous record was about 350 runs. So they smashed it by about 45 runs. So pretty good achievement for them, but and also pretty incredibly. I can't remember which player it was, but the Tasmanian guy that scored 220 runs. Ben Dunk scored 220 runs in their innings. So not often someone scores a double century in a one-day match.
Well,
and still end up losing the game. So
it's never happened.
Yeah.
That's good. So that was an interesting.
Incredible result. But yeah, as I said, I think Cricket Australia might have to start considering other venues in Sydney if North Sydney Oval is going to produce more matches like that where the bowlers just can't have any chance of getting a breakthrough really. So
it's interesting though. I think the fans would probably enjoy it.
Oh, I'm sure the fans would love it.
The bowlers might not. Eddie George, 1 for 101 off 10 overs.
Yeah,
he's bowled reasonably well in the last in this series with 5 wickets against South Australia. His old state.
Yeah.
We could start talking about how South Australia seems to get rid of players that seem to do well when they leave. Ryan Harris, Cole Scarone,
Dan Christian's playing for Victoria, I think. It's obviously a bit disappointing for South Australia at the moment, but last year the South Australia seemed to struggle in the one-day competition as well, and then they ended up just missing out on the Sheffield Shield final. So I'm not sure why that's the case. It seems a bit of an anomaly, really, that you can struggle so badly in one competition and then perform, so well in another. South Australia really should have made the Sheffield Shield final last year. They were on top of the ladder with about 2 matches to go and lost both those matches. So it's a bit of an odd thing. South Australia, under the name of the Adelaide Strikers, also struggling at the Big Bash last year as well. So it seems like we don't cope too well with limited overs cricket, but hopefully they can sort of reignite their season in the Sheffield Shield this season, which starts in a few weeks' time, I think. So
so it'll pretty much start straight after the World Cup.
Yeah.
They'll play a few, and then they'll have the Big Bash over.
The Big Bash is quite long this year,
and a bit of January, and then we'll finish off the Sheffield Shield. Yeah, it is quite long.
I think the Sheffield Shield takes a long break because of the fact that they've got the Big Bash, and then they've also got the Cricket World Cup, which starts in early February. So I think there's a fairly big break between the start of the Sheffield Shield season and the conclusion of it. So clearly, Cricket Australia seem to be putting all the eggs in the Big Bash basket, with the one day cup, being reduced from a series that went for 3 or 4 months to being condensed into sort of this one sort of carnival type tournament where all the matches are played within sort of 30 days of each other. So because we've also got some of the matches, like yesterday we had Queensland and Tasmania playing in New South Wales. So I think Cricket Australia try and get all these one day matches out of the way sort of as quickly as possible, and then most of the money and all the attendances are at the Big Bash games. So Cricket Australia know where the money sort of rolls in, and most of the players will get, their test selection will be considered based on their Sheffield Shield form more so than their one day format form. So and I think we've got the final of the Matador Cup coming up in a few days' time. The final is the 26th of October, so this time next week. And you have to think it will be between, as I mentioned, Western Australia, Queensland, and New South Wales. So a few more matches to go. And South Australia's last game against Tasmania will be on Gem on the 22nd of October. So if you want to tune in for that, that starts at 9:30 South Australian time. So and then both finals, the second v third prelim final and the grand final of the Matador Cup, both of those will be on Gem as well. So quite a few domestic cricket matches on free-to-air TV at the moment.
Also, just quickly talk about the Pakistan Australia match in the UAE, which, Australia lost, but practice match before they take on Pakistan, I think, this week. I'd say they didn't take it really seriously. Alex Dillon retired at 104, I think, and Brad Haddon was rested when they fielded on day 3, and the UAE keeper came out and hit for him.
Yeah, exactly. So I think any occasion where you recruit another player, not even your nationality, to fill into your side during the tour match, clearly they're sort of going a bit half-paced in regards to that tour match. So not a lot to read into it. Australia's Test cricket form has been pretty damn good over the past 12 months. Winning the Ashes 5-0 and then going over to South Africa and winning that series 2-1 as well. So
the only thing is they have had a reasonable break.
Oh, they've had a long break.
Exactly,
yeah. So there's clearly been a long break between the last series, but they've got hopefully the players that were in form over the last summer, remain in the same form that we saw 6-7 months ago. Steve Smith scored 100 in one of the tour matches, I think, and his form has been incredible in the past 12 months. And possibly future captain of Australia after Michael Clark retires. So it will be interesting how they go against Pakistan in front of probably a fairly small crowd, considering they're playing in a neutral location. But it should be a good test for them before the big test matches start in December against India. So quite a few important test matches coming up for Australia.
Definitely. Alright, so we'll head to a promo and be back with a bit about the Wallabies losing to New Zealand last night.
In the heat of the action, every choice you make has a huge impact.
You've got to make the right decisions. If you want to be a game changer,
you can't afford to take unnecessary risks
or rush into something that you might regret.
Whether you're in heavy traffic
or you've got room to move,
you still have to be in complete control.
Just one decision, one small thing,
one lapse in concentration,
and your whole world could change.
Welcome back, everyone. Last night, Australia had a fairly heartbreaking loss against New Zealand at Suncorp Stadium. They were in front with about 90 seconds to go and would have been one of their first wins over New Zealand in quite a long time, from memory. It was 28-29, and probably not a lot they can blame other than themselves, considering they had possession of the ball with about 90 seconds to go and they decided to kick it, out of bounds, and the ball didn't exactly travel very far. They kicked about 5 metres down the field, and New Zealand took possession and ended up scoring a try, basically with the last play of the game, and the conversion ended up putting them 1 point in front. So they would have been pretty disappointed with the result in the end, but probably in bigger news with their coach Hugh McKenzie ended up resigning after the game. In the aftermath, they revealed that the decision was made at about 10 a.m. that day. So the coach and the sort of board of the Australian Rugby Union sort of knew what was going to occur later in the day, and to sort of avoid any distractions, the coach didn't tell. It was only revealed after the game, so didn't tell any of his players or coaching staff about his decision. So bit of a surprise, and probably Australian Rugby Union has been in a bit of a poor patch recently in regards to results overseas and sort of interest in attendances here in Australia. So having their coach resign is probably not the greatest news for the sport.
Yeah, especially after last week or a couple of weeks ago losing to Argentina.
Yeah,
that's the first time Argentina had won one of the championship matches.
Yeah, I think they said it was their first time that they'd won at home sole in quite a few years. So not a great result for Australia there. And you would hope that the next coach that comes on board sort of has a bit more sort of faith from the board. Their coaching staff, players sort of get behind him and revitalise the team, because they've been sort of seem to be treading water over the past 2 or 3 years, not really improving and not really going backwards either. So because obviously Australia want to be number one in the world, and the way that they're going at the moment, that's not going to happen. And if you look at the recent results against New Zealand, Australia hasn't won the first Cup for about 15 years. So clearly there's a lot of work to do to, one, get the Australian national team, vying for the number one spot, but also to sort of gather a bit more interest in Australia, because we've seen that rugby league, Aussie rules, and even soccer is starting to go past as well. They had a good crowd of 45,000 there last night, but some of the other attendances for like Super Rugby games and whatnot have been struggling lately. So more turmoil for Wallabies in Australia.
Yeah, definitely. We'll see what happens with that. I think Australia needs to just have a bit of a clean out of the closet.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I think also, they seem to be running through coaches like there's no tomorrow. And they've had 3 in, I think, the past 4 years.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
That's something we have to look at, just having stability and trying to get the results slowly rather than expecting a coach to come in and all of a sudden our results to improve. It has to start from that lower level, like the Super Rugby, and then build it up. But we'll see what happens there, and just another year where Australia doesn't win the Brothers World Cup.
Yeah.
New Zealand is just too good.
Exactly. And even in a game where Australia dominate and, are on top of the scoreboard for, a large majority of the game, they still couldn't get over the line. So,
It's going to take more professionalism.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
We'll go to another promo, and we'll come back to South Australian Gridiron and wrap it up.
If you can run,
you can run.
If you can kick,
You can kick.
if you can score,
You can score.
whether a person is gay or straight,
Shouldn't matter in sport.
ability, attitude, and effort is what counts. If you can play,
You can play.
If you can play,
You can play.
If you can play,
You can play.
Welcome back. Here we've got Darren, who is at the Gridiron last night, yesterday, to discuss this week's matches.
Yes, thank you, Henry, and it's a very good morning to everyone out there. Of course, yesterday was round 6 of Gridiron South Australia, and we went out to Victoria Park and saw 2 great games. The first game was between the Eastside Razorbacks and the South Sydney Chiefs, and this one was a bit of a walkover. Eastside Razorbacks coming out the victors, 21 to South Sydney Chiefs 6. But the score doesn't say what the game was like. It was a very good game between both sides, and Eastside Razorback just came out better. As I said, the score was 21-6. In game 2, this was an absolute walkover, I must say, and they're looking like this could be a team to beat coming into the finals in December. Uni SA Eagles got over the Port Adelaide Spartans 30-0, and that was pretty well says it all. It was just a walkover for the Uni SA Eagles. Not really much spark from the Port Adelaide Spartans, but still a very good game. And of course, the Southern District Oilers had the bye, and we all do it all again next Saturday from 1 p.m. for the first game and 4 p.m. for the next game.
Thanks everyone for tuning in. Don't forget to check out the website www.ozsportsonline.com. Also the Facebook page and Twitter is at Ozsports FM. See you everyone next week.
Thank you very much.